Joshua chapter 3 verses 1 through 17. We finished chapter 2 last week and we considered the instance between Rahab and the spies in Canaan, especially in Jericho. And we talked about the means to the end. Even though you may have a good purpose, the process, the actions that you take to achieve that goal has to be biblical as well. In Rahab's case, was not so. Today's passage is focusing on God's work and our responsibility. Let's unpack what's in there and see what we can learn from the passage. At the end of chapter 2, which we didn't cover last week, but verses 23 and 24 has more detailed report from those spies. They spoke to Joshua and told them all that had happened to them when they were in Jericho. And chapter 3 verse 1, Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out from Shittim, and they came to the Jordan, he and all the people of Israel, and lodged there before they passed over. So compared to what Rahab did in chapter 2, in this chapter, the people of Israel, including Joshua, they are going through the process here. They're waiting for the instruction. The instruction is this. At the end of the 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, as soon as you see the Ark of the Covenant. So this is very important. Throughout the passage, we are going to see the instances of recording for the Ark of the Covenant. Here, it's the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God, being carried by the Levitical priests. The priests are carrying the Ark of the Covenant. It's not for everyone, but there's specific people there selected to do this job. Then you shall set out from your place and follow it. So the way we follow this Ark of the Covenant is this. You have to have some distance between you and the Ark of the Covenant. It says 2,000 cubits in length. So it's about, give or take, a half a mile away from the Ark of the Covenant. It's not too far, it's not too short, but you have to have a certain distance, and you are going to follow the Ark of the Covenant. And it says this, you may know the way you shall go. Because you have not passed this way before. Joshua is referring to the people of Israel. However, the people who are carrying this priest, carrying the Ark of the Covenant, they didn't really pass this way before either. So if you put this in today's context, as a pastor, it's not me telling you, instructing you, follow my way. I'm telling you this is the way of God, and let's follow this way together. The Ark of the Covenant. So please note this one throughout the passage. To compare this instance with what happened in the wilderness, these people about to cross the Jordan did not grumble against Joshua or this kind of strange instruction, because they're about to go on a war against these people who are already living in there. But they're supposed to follow the Ark of the Covenant. But let's revisit what happened in Exodus chapter 13. It says, and the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way. So he went before the Israelites. And whenever he moves, people followed. Whenever he settled in the wilderness, they have to stay there. And it's interesting because it's the way right there. It's in Hebrew term. But in Acts chapter 9, it's used in this sense as well. But Saul, before Paul's conversion, his name was Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord. The people who are following Jesus went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues at Damascus, so that he found any belonging to the way. So the disciples of the Lord was referred as the people who belong to the way. How can we apply these passages? God is leading the way, we're following him. The world is teaching us this way. Tradition or successful people, okay, this is supposed to be the sure way to succeed in anything. So follow this route and you're going to be okay. A lot of rich people, success people will tell you through their motivational speech, just follow me. A lot of people follow that. Better yet, because we're living in this postmodernistic society, people think that they're so unique. They're the first one and only one who's going through what's happening in their lives. So, my own way. Basically what they're doing is reinventing the wheel. They think they're the only ones who's going to college. They think they're the only ones who are getting married or have children, raising children. It's interesting because that's been happening over and over again throughout the human history. And there's nothing new under the sun, as we all know. But people always think they're the only one, unique one, going through whatever they're going through. That's why no one following these routes can be truly happy or satisfied with what they're doing, because they'll be completely lost in their actions. Let's take a look at those bad examples in the Bible. The first one is Sarai, Abram, and Hagar. Because they were so impatient, instead of waiting for God's mercy and love upon them, they just took action in their hands and did something. Abram went into Hagar and had Ishmael, which was not a promised child. Of course, God's will prevailed. He gave him child, Isaac, and he went through his covenant relationship with the Israelites. Another example is Israel as a nation asking for a king. If you look at the first Samuel, they're saying, give us a king like other nations. It's a tradition. Other nations are doing this. Look at all those rich, successful countries. We want to have our own king. So these are two of those examples following the worldly method and the way it works in this world. What does the Bible say? The biblical principle is this. In Deuteronomy chapter 13, it says, you shall walk after the Lord your God. And if you do that, these are the things that follows. Fear him, keep his commandments, obey his voice, and you shall serve him and hold fast to him. In so many instances, we see day in and day out, people come into church, they always follow the world. Because it makes perfect sense. Everyone else is doing it, so I'm going to do the same thing. And somehow they think they are following God's commandment. They're not. Just because I attend a church, that does not mean I am a saint. Because if there's no sign of me walking after the Lord our God and doing all these things, fearing, keeping his commandment, obeying his voice, and serve him and hold fast to him, just because you belong to a certain church, it doesn't mean anything in this world. Joshua chapter 3 verse 5 says this, Then Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourselves, because tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Well, do I need to consecrate myself? Do I need to be holy? No, you don't have to be. God will do his wonders anyway. But our responsibility here is we have to be holy because he is holy. And it's a commandment. Joshua did not suggest them, hey guys, if you want to be consecrate yourself, that'll be great. No. He said to the people, consecrate yourselves. It's imperative. For tomorrow, the Lord will do wonders among you. Our responsibility is right there. I cannot just say, I'm a Christian, I'm saved, so I don't have to do anything. That means I cannot be a lazy Christian. lazy Christian does not make sense. It doesn't work. Or I can do whatever I want to do because God will do his will anyway. He will fulfill his promise anyway, so I don't have to participate in there. So I'll just do the things that other people will do. That's not a good sign either. If you're just acting like other people in this world, if you desire for the same thing that other people desire, then don't say anybody else that you are a Christian, because it doesn't work that way. It's not that convenient. 1 Corinthians support this position. It says, every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air. That means what? We have a clear conscience and we have a clear goal and objective we're supposed to be going. Back in the first century, they had the Olympic Games and they want to win this, today's term, gold medal. But they have this self-control in all things. And we're saying, okay, I'm saved, I am a Christian, but I have no self-control. I'll just do whatever I feel like doing. I'll just do whatever I want to do. Paul is basically saying, you cannot do that, guys. Self-control is one of those fruit of the Spirit in Galatians chapter 5. And guess what? Self-control is the last one. Why? Even if you love somebody, if there's no control, that's not love. Let's say I'm a parent. I'm going to let my children do whatever they want to do out of love. That's not love. You're going to ruin your children. Because I have freedom to do whatever I want to do, I'm going to break the law and all kinds of stuff. No, I cannot do that. I have to abide by the law. Self-control has to be in place for every single fruit of the Spirit from Galatians chapter 5. How about you? In your daily lives, do you exercise self-control? Even those people who are trying to achieve worldly things exercise self-control in all things. But how can we not exercise self-control in our lives? And God spoke to Joshua. The Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. Exalting Joshua among the people, it's not about Joshua. God is saying, by doing so, I want the people of Israel to know that I am with you as I was with Moses. And he continued, saying that the Ark of the Covenant, you have to command the priest to bear the Ark of the Covenant and do this. It's going to come back again in our passage, the Ark of the Covenant. And Joshua said to the people of Israel, come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. Joshua did not say, folks, come and listen to me. No, he didn't say that. He said, listen to the words of the Lord your God that I received from him. And Joshua said, here is how you shall know that the living God is among you. This is how you shall know. Know that the living God is among you. God told Joshua, I want them to know that I'm with you like I was with Moses. Now Joshua is telling people that you will know that the living God is among you. Here the know, the translation of Hebrew word, is this. It means you know something by means of personal experience. You know for sure. This is how it feels like. You know for sure this is how it feels like having the living God among us. And this knowing, this word is also used in many different ways, especially when Adam knew his wife, meaning they have this physical relationship and had a child. Same thing. That word is knowing. So this knowing is not just theoretical information. It's something that you really know firsthand. So let's summarize this one more time. Moses to Joshua, God said, as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. That's what he said. In verse 10, what did he say? Living God is among you. Joshua told the people, he is with you, among ourselves. So Moses, Joshua, everyone. God is with us. All the believers, we should know the living God of Israel is among us. But why is it important? Because I've heard many people, especially younger generation, saying this to me. Okay, my parents, my grandparents, they're Christians and they love Christ and this is how they lived. But my God is a little bit different than my parents' generation's God. My question back to them is, what do you mean by that? A lot of people think the way God worked and the way our parents' generation believed in God, that God is different than the way I understand my God. The reason why we have this discrepancy is because we do not go back to the source, the Bible. We cannot say my parents' God versus my God. There's only one God who is described and revealed himself through the Word of God, which is the Bible. Your grandparents, your parents, yourself, and your children, we all can sit down and look at the Bible together, agree on that who God is based on the Bible. Because we don't do that, we may see different versions of God in different people's minds. If your imagination or your belief or your understanding of God is not based on the Bible, that is a very definition of idolatry. Because you created your own image of God right there. So please be very careful not doing those things in our lives. So there's a proper preparation. It shows the Ark of the Covenant 3 times in this passage, and the priest, their role of bearing the Ark of the Covenant is appearing here as well. So we have to prepare for this one. Again, they're going into war against these people, but the reason why we have to do this is we're different. It's not a worldly method, but we are taking the Ark of the Covenant, and people will follow the Ark of the Covenant. Interestingly, up to this point in Joshua, people did not complain about this strange preparation method. They didn't say a word about this. But if you look at Exodus chapter 14, when people are chased by these Egyptian soldiers, this is what they said. You want us to die in the wilderness, Moses? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? They're not happy about it. And they said, leave us alone. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. They're scared of the Egyptian soldiers. That's why they're telling Moses all these things. Imagine how Moses felt when he heard this. He didn't volunteer to lead the Israelites. God picked him, chose him in Exodus chapter 3, and you go tell them what's going to happen. And he followed, he obeyed God's commandment. And these people, after all that Moses went through, they're complaining. However, this is from verses 11 through 12. Later in that chapter, they saw all those people, Egyptian soldiers, get destroyed in the Red Sea. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. They saw the power of God, And then they feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. So about 20 verses ago, they're complaining, we're all going to die, but we're going to go back to Egypt. It would have been easier or better for us to serve them than dying in the wilderness. Now they saw something that God did. So they feared the Lord and believed in the Lord and Moses. Okay, so was it genuine conversion? Let's think about this. When we hear a great sermon, or when we go on a retreat sometimes, we get all this grace of God, experience grace of God, we say, and then I'm a changed person. People say that all the time. But a lot of times, though, that is temporary. And for these people's instance, it was not a permanent conversion either. If you look at chapter 15, it only took them 3 days. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. And guess what they did? People grumbled against Moses. What shall we drink? And this generation went on and on with all these complaints, grumbling against God and Moses. But they're crossing the Jordan here. Now the priest bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan. So they passed over the Jordan. Let's compare these two instances. The generation who didn't make it to the promised land, and this new generation who are about to go to the promised land. First instance, the Red Sea instance. When they crossed the Red Sea, they were out of Egyptian bondage. They were the slaves of Egypt, but they were freed from that bondage. And that was the beginning of their wilderness. The life changed dramatically from Egyptian bondage to the wilderness of their own. Crossing the Jordan, that was the conclusion of the wilderness. It's a new life. So if you look at Joshua chapter 5, after they have these crops and then the food from that land, that's when the manna stopped. So that's the end of their wilderness life. And also, of course, into the promised land means it's a new life. It's physical change from Egypt to wilderness, from wilderness to the promised land. But if you look at it in a spiritual term, we were sinners before we crossed the Red Sea. God saved us with his mercy and love upon us. And into the wilderness, a lot of times if you just become a Christian, sometimes you don't see any changes. You're not happy about the situation. But as you grow older, you will cross the Jordan into the promised land, the new life, mature Christian life. Is it the end of your Christian journey? No. As we can look it up, the rest of Joshua, they were going against these people in that Canaan, and they had to do a lot of work, battle after battle. They have to win, and sometimes they lost, but they have a lot of work to do to fulfill God's promises upon them. Even though God fought for them, they had their responsibilities as well. Crossing the Jordan was not the end in any sense. To do so, we have to change our mindset. And main way of doing that is looking up the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, as the Israelites did. What do you look for, and what are you looking at right now? Are you looking at the same thing that the world is looking at? Do you desire to achieve or obtain something that the world is asking you to achieve so you can be happy? Please look around. How many happy people do you know by chasing after the worldly dreams? Are they truly happy in their lives? Spiritual journey is not about gaining what we want to gain from this world, but the way we spend our time, the way we spend our energy, the way we set our goals. If they are all identical to the world, how can we say that we're Christians? And the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord is carried by the priest. Even though they're carrying them, it's not about the priest. It's all about the Ark of the Covenant. And what was in the Ark of the Covenant? Anybody remember? You can look up Exodus, Numbers in different places, but if you look at Hebrews chapter 9 verse 4, that clearly tells you what's in there. 3 items: manna, Aaron's budded rod, and those tablets that Moses received from God. All 3 are telling us who God is. It's manifesting God's providence through manna, because He provided everything we need to sustain our lives in the wilderness for 40 years. And He's the one who picked who will lead Israel. Aaron's budded rod, that's the one that shows the instance in Numbers chapter 17. And also the tablets. The word of God is written on the tablet. So the priest, all they're doing was showing who God is. If I put this in today's context, the priest is supposed to be pastors who's holding the Ark of the Covenant. Folks, don't look at me, pastors. Please look at the Ark of the Covenant, even though that Ark of the Covenant must be carried by the priest, not anybody else. But it's not about me having this special role. It's all about the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, which contains those 3 items manifesting who God is. Especially, I am preaching the words of God from the tablet. So, when you attend the church, attend the service, what do you look for? What's your goal from that service? We're worshiping God together. Our goal is supposed to be learning from God, receiving the Word of God, and knowing who God is, that living God is among us. Do you see the Ark of the Covenant instead of other things? More importantly, do you follow the Ark of the Covenant? Let's all follow God's lead and His instruction, so we will know where we're headed instead of being lost in this wilderness, and follow God all the way to the promised land so we can participate in God's promise. His fulfillment of His promise, His faithfulness will be exhibited through our lives.